Hello, thank you for joining me again in the studio. My name is Sharon and I paint in watercolour mainly. Today we're going to have a little look at colour. What is this thing called colour? Some of us love it, some of us hate it. And by that I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say to you, I've produced a beautiful drawing and I can do that, but the second I add colour to it, I spoil it. And very often that can simply be just a case of not being sure and confident enough with what your colours do and how you can work them, how you can make them do what you want them to do. And of course, a huge part of that is simply the fact that you need to know what they can do. And again, I've spoken to people who have said to me, yeah, I know, but I'm not interested in all the technicals of it. I just want to paint and enjoy what I'm doing. And that's fine. But actually, if you know and expect and anticipate what these particular pigments are going to do for you, can you imagine how much easier your life would be? Just think about that for a second. Certain colours have different characteristics, and we look at them and very often read a book, oh, and they're so dry, aren't they? They're so dry. By the time you've read the first page, you're already just about ready to go to sleep. Forget it. Don't do that. Your very, very best way to explore and experiment is to play. And when you have this situation here, this is a palette from, well, lots and lots of work here. Do you think I ought to sell it maybe? I might make a fortune. When you're in this kind of situation, don't just put that under the tap and clean it. When you've got 5 minutes and you're sitting down and you're watching TV or just poodling about listening to music, take your palette out and a piece of gash paper and play. And by that I mean a bit of water, put the colour on the paper, mix it, see what it does. What happens when you drop one of the other colours into it? Does it granulate? Do they not like each other? What do they do? And this bit of video is all about that. It is simply playing. And I want to show you some of the things that you can do. Just hold a few in your head. You don't have to remember all of it, but if you hold a few, next time you're painting a sky and you want a whoosh of colour through that sky to make it look as though it's raining, I bet you by the end of this video you will know how to do that. So come with me and explore with me, and let's just enjoy the journey for what it is. Here we go then, a quick whiz through all the different colours to see what they do, how they work and how they will apply to you. I think the first thing that I would do if I had a new colour and I wanted to try it out, I would draw myself a black line like this with that's a permanent marker. I want to bring that into the middle so that you can see it, and I'm going to bring you in so that you can have a better look. And what I would do with that is see whether my colour is transparent or whether it is opaque. And by that I mean transparent. So this is quinacridone gold. And if I paint across there, I can see the black line totally, completely and utterly. We know, however, that if we use something like white, white is going to obliterate it. So here we have a white paint and I can cover it. So we know that that is opaque. You can't see through it. If you do that with all of your colours, you will be able to see in which varying degrees you would be able to use them, whether they would totally cover or whether you would be able to see through them. It's a useful thing to know. That is well worth doing. Now you see, if I take black, this is Payne's grey. I know that I can paint over there with Payne's grey and that just hides the line. So know your colours, know what will do what. A lot of the cadmiums, because they're thick colours, they will also obliterate that. And the usual reason for that is because the pigment is larger granules. That's why it's larger pieces, chunks of paint. Let me bring that back through here, and we're going to go out a little bit more so that you can see what I'm going to do. Make sure you can see everything. Know what is what. It's a good plan to take a colour. So here we have, this is Prussian blue. When you have your palette and you land up with a messy muck like this, don't clean it, don't throw it out. Use those paints to experiment and to explore and to play and see what they do on a gash piece of paper. So for instance, you could take something like, this is Prussian blue, bit of water, and again I'm going to bring you in here because I want you to see this. Are you ready? I'll be jiggling you about, you'll be fed up with me. And I would take some water, and I'm going to put the water here next to it, a puddle of water. And then I'm going to run my brush, a wet brush, from the water to the paint, and you're going to say, "Hello paint, my name's Water, it's nice to meet you," and see what it does. Now that particular paint, I know for a fact, is one that rushes. I call them rushers, but they're actually paints that we call this blossoming. They blossom into anything else that you put them into. So if I were to put that into a sky, you can imagine the effect that I would get from it, can't you? Here we go. What should we try now? This is burnt sienna. So if I put some burnt sienna down, you need a puddle. You need, wet paint in there. And you need a very clean brush, because if you water is contaminated, that's going to... Oh, now look, see what I mean about that being a rusher? Let's try over here. So we come through. "Hello paint, my name's Water, it's nice to meet you." So that's another one that's a good one. One I know is quite recalcitrant is, this is cerulean blue. Now cerulean blue is made up with big chunks of pigment. This I know is opaque. And for a fact, when you put the colour down on the paper, it sits there and it settles down into the grains of the paper. So again, if I pull you even closer, you can see the pattern of the paper, because the heavy granules have settled down, nestled down into the dips in the paper. So that is what will happen with your heavier granules. Here's water. So if I come across and I say, "Hello cerulean blue," oh, I'm not so keen on that. Not so keen on that. And if you notice, can you see that actually, rather than the transfer being the paint over to the water, there's a little bit there, but the water is running into the paint. So if we know those things, they help us. They help us. So I would work my way through my palette, all my paints, seeing what they do and how they work and whether they run. The next thing I would be very interested in doing is putting them together to see how they behave together. For instance, we know that that one's thick and claggy. Let me come out again so that you can see where I'm going now. We know that cerulean blue is quite thick. I'm just moving you so that you can see that. It's quite thick and chunky paint. If I take this and I use this quite wet, see, you have to manipulate it. It's not running anywhere. You've got to move it and shift it and shove it about. So that with some water, and then if I come into that with burnt umber, these two paints really, really don't like each other. They are not friends. They don't get along just because teacher says they should. And when I put one into the other, there's no blossoming, nothing's happening. You've got to manipulate them and move them. They won't move on their own. But they make the most gorgeous grey. That's a lovely colour if you're painting something like a silver birch tree. I'm coming in so that you can see it again. And the interesting thing about this is that it will granulate. I know it granulates. The two of them separate. They really are such not friends that if we walk away and we leave that, already we can see that the blue is puddling here. It's coming back into its own. And here's the brown. And they're separating. And that can be a good thing. If you're painting rocks or you're painting the bark of a tree, just imagine that could work for you. I love that colour mix if I'm painting sort of distant moons. That's a good sort of mystical colour for me to use if I'm painting moons. I like that very much. You have, let me come out again. I hope I'm not jiggling you about too much, making you feel poorly. Sorry about that. You have colours that are quite exciting on their own. This one, this is quite unusual. This is called Smoltz, S-M-A-L-T. This is the most gorgeous blue. Again, it's a thick paint, difficult to manipulate when you're working with it because you have to really work. But look at that colour. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous colour. This is a colour that used to be made with ground blue glass, and that is why it's quite special. It's a kind of heritage colour. Our artists of old used to use that a lot. The saddest thing about it, however, is the fact that it isn't a very good colour for light fastness, sadly. But for us to use for fun, it's great. I mean, it's a super colour, lovely blue. But again, you have to manipulate it. You need to move it. But you see, good again, because I can see already that that's granulating. Got some very, very nice granulation going on in there already. You can see that the two of them there. And see how if you want to paint a beautiful blue sky that is clean and clear and has no brush marks in it, neither of these two are the paints to use, because you will get brush marks because it will be moving the big granules of paint around, and the potential is that it will granulate and turn into this kind of this I don't know, it's like crocodile skin, and you don't want that in the sky, do you? You don't want that in the sky. But that's Smoltz, and it's interesting and it's fun, but you've got to use them in the right kind of positions and places. Next, let's have a little look at something like, we used it up here, this is quinacridone gold, and this is a beautiful colour. Originally this appeared on the market in the 70s, and it was a byproduct of the car industry. When you take it out of the tube, it's toffee, and you can bleed it into the most glorious sunshine yellow. Pale, pale, pale. Beautifully, beautiful, clear colour, and it is very, very transparent. So you can use that and layer it on other colours, which is super duper. Interestingly enough, when you use that, and when you have this colour in your palette at the same time, this is burnt sienna, they initially look very alike, but they bleed out differently. And the reason why they look so alike is it basically, when you look at the numbers on the tube, every tube has pigment numbers on it. When you look at the pigment numbers on the tube, they're both made with 3 different pigments, and the pigments in both tubes are the same. So this is why they look like this. Quinacridone. means 5 rings in Latin, and that basically is the chemical composition of that paint. And that was derived from the car industry in the 1970s, and the paint industry, our industry, had the kind of byproducts. It's resilient, it's durable, it's very light, fast, it's very strong, so it's used for paint on municipal buildings, etc. Very good colour. Now, another very beautiful colour, but a colour that is a bit of a problem as far as we're concerned when we're painting with it, this is Opera Rose, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And when you put it next door to these blues, oh, it's lovely. Look at that, look at that. I do love it. I do love it. I love to paint over the blue with it. Look at that for a scrubby, scrubby tint. Look at that. Beautiful colour. And when you bring the blue down into it, it makes this lovely mauve. It's a super colour, it's a nice colour to use, but beware, because whatever is in that gives it that kick, it's a fluorescent paint, and unfortunately it isn't as light fast as it maybe could be. And that's the pity of it, because it means that if anything's going to fade, that's a paint that may and probably will, in fact, fade, which is a shame. Having said that, I like it for other reasons. I want to introduce you to this. This is Perylene Maroon. I love this colour. Absolutely love this colour. It's this glorious dark, look at that. It's a paint that blossoms, it blooms and it flows. But it's just like painting, I know this sounds grisly, but it's like painting with blood. It's that colour. It's gorgeous. I would say to you, it mixes nicely with, it makes some very interesting dark purples. Moody purples, I have to say. But let's try that. Look, this is Prussian blue. Look for shadows. If you wanted it for shadows. So you've got one paint blossoming on top of a blossoming paint. So it's really quite interesting. But it makes that beautiful bluey grey. Look at that. Who would have thought it? This, if you're interested in florals and botanicals, this is hydrangeas in the autumn when the frost has had the plants, and the flat dried heads are that brown with a touch of green and that glorious, glorious red underneath. Really quite exciting. So that's a good colour for that. But the reason why I wanted to show you that, if you were to paint in a red, all the reds have this horrible tendency to be very dull when they dry. So you need to be careful, because they can kill a painting. And if you use this underneath, so I would underpaint with this lovely Opera Rose, and then I would, when that's bone dry, absolutely bone dry, I would go in and I would paint my red over the top. This glows through this, and the two together, they give it a bit of a zing and a kick and a shine, which is nice. This is what you're looking for with your paint. I don't know what that is about red. It just can be quite dull. It's a shame. Now, another colour I wanted to show you, which fascinates the life out of me, talking about fluoresce and what colours can do. This is an SAA tube of turquoise. It's a phthalo, basically, another chemical colour. But it's incredible. This colour, let me show you. Under it. Now this is a runner, you've got to watch it because it will run out of the tube too. As you can see from the top of my tube, it's a bit mucky. But this is a lovely colour. Look at that. It's a runner, it's a blossomer. So if we put water next to it, it's straight in there. It doesn't even ask permission, it's gone. Look. You can't even see where the water is. The minute you put water down, it's full. It's covered. It's a gorgeous colour, and it's bright and it's light and it's exciting. Look at that. And it goes a million miles. It just keeps on spreading and spreading. But the sad thing about this, and I'm looking at my iPad now next to me, I'm looking at it now and I can't believe it. What you're seeing on the camera is completely different to what I'm seeing here on the paper. And as many times as I have tried to photograph that particular paint with my phone, my camera, my iPad, anything, it is not that colour. And it's obviously something, it's like the Northern Lights. Many of us see the Northern Lights in white, but when you photograph them, they're green. And the same thing is happening here. I promise you, it's not that blue. That looks like it's not quite cobalt, is it? It almost looks cerulean there. If you compare that and this here, it almost looks cerulean. But trust me, that is the most incredible greeny turquoise, and you're not seeing it, which is bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Okay, something else I wanted to show you was Scarlet Lake. Scarlet Lake, I like the lakes, they're lovely colours, but again we need to just watch them a little bit because they can be a bit sort of fugitive. Reds are anyway, to be honest with you, but a lovely colour, look at that. The lakes are nice colours, they're clear colours, they tend to be, they're not opaque, so we can paint with other colours and they're transparent. The history behind them are quite interesting. The lake colours used to be produced from, they're basically dyes, because the material companies back in the Industrial Revolution used to have scraps of fabric that were left over, and the artists would soak the fabric until the colour flooded out of the fabric and was in liquid form in the dish that they used to use, so hence the lake, that's the lake. And then they would allow that to just evaporate off, and the pigment that was left behind in the bottom of the dish was the colour that you and I use today as artists. That's how you get your lake colours. So interesting. I love the history behind paints. Enjoy all of that. Indian yellow used to be clay from India that came from underneath the wee of the sacred cows. They used to feed them mango leaves, and they'd wee on the clay, and then the clay would be collected, and it was always teardrop shaped because it would be rolled in a ball, and then that done like this with their hands, and that was a teardrop shape, and it used to stink, not surprisingly, but lovely colour. But not particularly light fast, which was a shame. Finally, I'd like to show you this here, and I'm going to bring the camera in for this because this is fun. This is good fun, so I'm going to put that there so that the camera's got something to focus on, and we're coming in. And I'd like to show you this here. This is just Viridian. Don't like this colour on its own. It's good to mix with other things, but I wouldn't ever dream of using it on its own. I think it's a horrifying green. Good for fabrics on some of my fantasy paintings, but I don't think I'd want to use that too much with my foliage. I'd always mix that with something else. And I'm creating a nice wet puddle. And I have Windsor Violet. Now there's something about these paints and the binders and the carriers and whatever is in these paints. So this is Windsor Violet. And if I take some Windsor Violet on the end of my brush, I want it to be quite liquid. This is a blossoming paint, and I'm just going to tip that because. And when I put this into here, it explodes. Did you see that shockwave? Oh, look at that. You can see the complete circle, the shockwave as it went out into the dark, into the green, and there it is. It couldn't be more perfect. And if you get that right, just imagine if you get that right and you're painting the leaf of one of your botanicals, and you get that purple edge up to the edge, and you'd land up with this gorgeous, glorious dark colour around the edge. Because when we mix the Viridian, I'll just come out a little bit. When we mix the Viridian with the violet, it gives us the most interesting violety, shadowy, lovely colour. See, that's a different kettle of fish, isn't it? That suddenly makes your shadows and your botanicals look quite interesting. That way. But this initial it's just so exciting. The first time that ever happened to me, I nearly fell over. I was so excited by the creation of this amazing circle around my green. All these colours have all their own particular characteristics, and it's a good idea to get to know them. Just get to know them slowly, and the best way to do that is just to take your palette and to play with it with what's left before you clean it. I wouldn't waste any of that paint. I would play, just wait, drop some in later, see how much it cauliflowers, whether you get runbacks, whether it becomes dull. What does it do? Does it granulate? Does it not granulate? Is it opaque? Do they run into each other? And when you get to know those things, you see, for you, that's brilliant, because it means that you will be able to manipulate that for yourself when you are painting. Finally, I just wanted to show you this. If you're interested in colour, this is my favourite book. I absolutely love this book, The Secret Lives of Colour, and it's Cassia St. Clair, and it's absolutely filthy because I've loved it and used it, and it travels with me. And inside you've got all the basic stuff about how it all works and how you see the colour, but then she goes through all the colours one by one and tells you all about them, and they're colour coded, look, on the edge of the book. So if you wanted to go to your greens, you can go straight there. And every single colour has its story. Green, there is a Buddhist fable about the colour green, and that will tell you. And through here it does verdigris, how they made it, when they made it, what they use it for. Now, absinthe, well, that's the drink, isn't it? That's that green. All these lovely colours, and if you want to smile and and you want to laugh and you like a bit of the interest behind the paint, this is the book for you. It's not heavy and it isn't boring, and it gives you the backstory. It's lovely. I love it to bits. My favourite book, that is The Secret Lives of Colour. So thank you for joining me right now. I will see you for our next instructional video. Bye for now.